I certainly didn't get my sons. I'll check if there is, if there's something you said.
We keep meeting here. It's like a little family.
No, thank you.
Sure.
Oh, I don't want that. I don't want that. I need something else. I hope I have the right stuff. Okay. Are we ready? Okay.
I'm so smooth.
All right. I'm going to call the Board of Trustees, Village of Riverwoods. Will you please stand with me and say the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will you please call the roll?
Mayor Ford,
Present.
Trustee Clayton,
Here.
Trustee Dickin. Here. Trustee Eastbon,
Here.
Trustee Howell,
Here.
Hinton,
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business is approval of the minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting of October 1st. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Any comments? Trustee Hollander, please.
I'm not sure if this is the right place, but I've noticed we recently are getting the agendas and the company material through the web rather than through a PDF, which may be for very good reasons. But I can't search when it's on this. I have to then reconvert it back to a PDF file in order to do a search for certain things. Was the change in how we're getting the material to make it just easier for administration, or was there a different reason for it?
May I
I
answer?
meant, oh, absolutely. Trustee Dickin, please.
Yeah, a lot of these files are very large. So one of the reasons was to save space that we use in our emails. The other reason was that the file that's on the web is always the most up-to-date file. So when you click on the link, it makes it easier to make sure that you're looking at the most current version of the agenda and the packet that has been posted. Now, your question about being unable to search, can you clarify what you mean?
Yeah, if I went to put in my name on this, try to search for it, it comes up 0. But if I move it to a PDF file, then it comes up with all the hits. It's a minor inconvenience. I can switch it to a PDF file. It takes me 2 minutes. It's not a big deal, but I wanted to know if anybody else was having the same problem.
I'm not sure I follow. You should be able to click Control F or Command F and
you should
search.
be.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I understand you should, but it doesn't.
Maybe we can offer some workarounds
Yeah.
after the meeting or tomorrow, if that's okay.
And if it's
We'll
just
keep-
because it's
we'll note it.
easier and make it
Yeah.
up to date, then individual trustees can convert it themselves. I don't
I
want to
do
make a
know
big deal out of
it does make construction more efficient and faster,
Well, then just leave it.
so-
We'll do the work at
and the page
the end
numbering
user.
and so forth. Okay, we'll go into that. We'll look at that. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, please.
Abstain.
Oh, abstain, thank
I
you.
wasn't here.
Thank you, trustee Jamerson. Finance Director's report, we'll start with the approval of bills. May I have a motion for the approval of bills, please?
So, second.
Pick one. Pick one. Are there any questions or comments about the bills being presented? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton?
Aye.
Trustee Dickon?
Aye.
Trustee Eastmond?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jameson?
Aye.
Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Director Vasquez, quarterly financial reports, please.
Thank you, Mayor. A few items before we get to the quarterly reports. We just spent some time earlier this evening discussing the 5-year projections for our finances. I will use the feedback received from the board to finalize the budget and appropriations ordinance, which will come at a later time. I'll also begin work on preparing the documents for the tax levy. Also, the acoustical engineer was on site over the past week to do some initial testing on the acoustics of the room. We will report back when we know more about their assessment. And then presented tonight in the packet are the unaudited financials for the third quarter of 2024. Starting with the revenues, we are trending close to our budgeted target for the year, with over 70% of the budget revenue received at this point. This looks much better than last quarter now that property taxes have been mostly collected for the year. Of particular note, home rule taxes, municipal sales taxes, state income tax, electric utility taxes, and cable TV franchise fees are trending right at 75% or slightly higher. Municipal fuel tax is right around 72% of budgeted revenue, and the hotel tax is at 73%. Expenses in the general fund are overall near 65% for being 3/4 of the way through the year. There are several reasons why we are below the 75% benchmark for 3/4 of the year. Included in the budget expenses was $300,000 for contingency, of which only $100,000 has been used for earnest money towards the federal life purchase. Director Witt and I both tended to be conservative for expected expenses from our respective departments, as we'd only been in place for a few months at the time we created our budgets for '24 and wanted to have capacity to take on items that could come up throughout the year. The general fund is now showing $517,000 surplus at the end of the third quarter, as opposed to the deficit at the end of the first quarter and a smaller surplus of $130,000 that I noted back at the end of the second quarter. This is mostly a timing issue, as we are now far enough into the year to see items like our property taxes much further along in their collections. Also, due to conservative budgeting of expenses, not all items that we budgeted for in 2024 will be expended. If there are opportunities for savings, or if it is determined that there are some items that are not needed for '24, our staff takes advantage of these opportunities for savings. In the MFT fund, revenues are trending right on target at 75% through the third quarter. Expenditures are well below budget at 12%. Thankfully, with fewer snow events than normal in the early months of the year, we had very few invoices for snow removal. Although we have the early winter months at the end of the year to consider, I feel very optimistic that we will end the year with a surplus instead of the deficit that was budgeted for the fund. Over in the water fund, revenues are at 80% of the annual budget amount. At this point last year, the water revenue was at 74% of the budget amount and still finished the year at 110%. Last quarter revenue was only at 39%, but the warmer months bring more water usage, and because we only bill residents quarterly, we usually have to wait until the third quarter financials to see our revenues look closer to our projections. Expenditures are at 53% at this point in the year. It should be noted that a significant part of the budgeted expenses come from purchasing our water from Northbrook, and those monthly bills have been trending a little bit lower this year. At this point in the year, we have spent $900,000 of the $1.7 million we had budgeted for capital projects. Most of this was for water main work on Saunders Road. After review with Director Witt, we had determined that the $600,000 that was budgeted for Palmer Court replacement work that was included in the capital budget was not necessary for this calendar year. However, we will still end the year with a deficit due to the larger scope of the capital project that was done in '24. Over in the sewer fund, revenues are at 112% of the budgeted amount for the year. Again, this is because of the 125,000 received from Walters Kluwer that was explained to the board back in April. Without that amount included, we would be at about 84% of our budgeted revenue for the year. Expenditures are low at this point in the year at only 13% of what we budgeted. Not all of the maintenance work included in the budget will happen this year. Also, our sewer lining capital project that has now been completed, we have not yet received the finalized invoice for payment, so that is not reflected in the expenses right now. And then over in our capital fund, revenue for the capital fund is based on transfers or general or grant revenue, neither of which have happened at this point in the year. Expenditures are at 31% of the annual budgeted amount. It should be noted that we budgeted a high expenditure scenario for our capital fund, so all of the projects may not ultimately be approved to happen in 2024. At this point, we already know that the budgeted capital projects, such as the bunker court drainage and the demonstration center pathway, were not moving forward in 2024. The recent police vehicle that was just approved for purchase at our second meeting in October will not be reflected in the expenses until the fourth quarter report. And that's what I have for my report this evening.
Are there any questions from our trustees? Thank you. Thank you, Director. Moving on, the treasurer's report. Our treasurer isn't with us this evening. Director of Community Services report. Let's start with the status on Sanders Road, perhaps.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
So on the agenda for tonight, there was an item to be considered for resolution for an expenditure for the Saunders Road surface redo project from Deerfield Road up to Duffy. Due to some circumstances which occurred on Friday, the village was not made aware of an additional amount of money that needed to be added to the construction cost in the tune of about $500,000. So that item has to be pulled for tonight in order for the board to give some consideration for that amount of money. Other items on Saunders Road, the county continues their work at the intersection at Deerfield Road and Saunders Road. There will be periodic lane closures, which they cannot pin down on what days, what times necessarily, but the closures would be restricted generally to northbound for traffic going north of Deerfield and southbound going south of Deerfield, as the contractors need to work partially within the street area in order to do their digging and push the pipe, not only the pipe, but to get the sleeve first in and then the sanitary line through that and then make their closures. So we anticipate that work coming to some kind of closure within the month of November. Also on Saunders Road, I think last month I alluded to the fact that we have a water main leak at the 1600 block of Saunders Road. The vacuum truck was out, I believe it was yesterday, and they completed the work, yet they did not quite find where the leak is. They found that one house south of 1661 near a fire hydrant, they vacuumed out a hole, and the amount of water that was coming through, they weren't able to keep up with evacuating the amount of water that was actually coming through there. So I don't know if they backfilled at the moment, but we do know roughly within a 10-foot plus or minus where this particular issue is. Still don't know if it's a leak at the valve. At that point, there was a change in old pipe versus new pipe. So they believe that it is a connection point that's probably just south of that particular valve where the issue is. So next week there will be work done to find that particular leak and to fix the problem. There will be a shutdown for 9 homes in that area. They will be given at least a 72-hour notice of when the work will occur, and hopefully we can get the thing done within the course of one day. It's not going to take that much time to actually vacuum out and find the leak, make the repair, and then the water can go back on. Whether or not there's a boil water notice or not is yet to be determined. I would venture to say that there will be, since there is depending on how the thing is leaking, we believe that the water is coming from that valve location because the hole was dug south of the valve and the water was flowing southbound. Another item of note, the hydrant flushing and valve exercising project is complete at this point in time. GHA is putting together a list of repairs that have been noted due to the valve exercising portion of that. We do not have a list of that potential repair work in hand, but they are working on that. Expect to get that within the next several days. And then lastly, on my report, the sewer lining project is complete. We're just waiting for a final pay request to come in through the contractor so we can close out that project.
Are there any questions for our director? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item of business, consultants report, or attorneys report, please.
We have made a lot of progress. We've got the final subdivision plat for the Federal Life subdivision in hand. It's been signed by half the parties that need to sign it. We hope to get the rest of the signatures in the next few days. Most of the remaining signatures are Lake County officials. We are tentatively scheduled to close Tuesday if we have the plat back with all the signatures by then. If not, we'll just have to roll the closing back a day or two. We'll play it by ear. But I think overall we're in pretty good stead to be able to close with our documentation. After we close, well, then we have a lot of more work to do, but I hope to be able to report to the board by the next meeting that we've closed on the purchase and made the conveyance to the fire district.
Are there any questions? Any comments? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you very much. Right? Thank you. Plan Commission report, please. Chair Brightcove.
Good evening. I have nothing to report. Good exercise, though. Any questions?
Oh, are there any questions for our chair? Oh, all right. Okay, all right. Thank you. Next, Zoning Board of Appeals, please. Chair Granitor.
Well, I love this because we've had a changeover. She had nothing to report and I, for a change, do.
All right.
The Plan Commission met on October 10th in its guise as the sign committee to approve signage that was requested for 1105 Milwaukee. That's the bank building on the corner. And that's the one that has been continued for 4 months, I believe. And on the 10th, we met and we saw the proposal, which is totally within ordinance, and it was approved by the committee. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions for our chair?
Very exciting.
Congratulations.
Very exciting.
Next is our police chief. Chief, your report, please.
Yes, the police activity is in the board packet, and I don't have anything else.
Are there any questions for our chief? Fire district report. Another chief. Chief Kruger.
Just got one thing. So,
okay.
Sorry, I'll be quick. I just want to commend the board, the mayor, Bruce, and the whole board for this new fire station relocation process. Like, kind of going off without a hitch, but it's been really great working with the village and everybody just on the team and who's associated with the process so far. Just can't say enough about the board. So we really appreciate your support and the community and everything else, and we look forward to the next phase. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a question for our fire chief.
Oh, sure.
So we have your old station.
Yep.
And since you had experience with old stations throughout the country, what do you suggest that we do with it? What has been done?
You can put some video poker machines in there if you want.
Pardon?
Put some video poker machines in there. We can recoup our costs for the. No.
Seriously, there are fire stations which are abandoned or
Right.
moved to new ones all the time. And is there a use or a few uses which are made of them that make sense, that maybe would help us?
Maybe the police might be able to use some extra room or office space or parking of vehicles.
Don't ask the
Oh, boy.
officers. I've heard.
So there isn't
I've heard
any,
the
there
ideas.
aren't typical uses of previously used fire stations.
Not that I know, this is my first time relocating a fire station, so usually they sell the building back to somebody, but our agreement is that it goes back to the village, so. But we'll put our heads together, we can come up, I'm sure we can come up with some creative ideas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief, oops, sorry, Chief Dano.
Do you think that the building would be suitable for a private ambulance service?
Possibly. Maybe like Superior or, 'cause I know they relocated, so yeah, I mean, that's up to the village if you want to rent that out. I know they go to the elevated care as much as we do, so and sometimes they usually go non-emergency, but transporting from hospital to hospital, but it might be an option.
Yeah. Would our village attorney know when the fire station, what date approximately would be turned back to us in this process so that we know what date we have to work with?
Not until the new station is fully up and running and they've
So it's-
completely moved out and.
Year and a
They
half,
don't-
2 years?
It's in
2
there.
years.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have a quick follow-up
Sure.
question. Is there anything structurally particular about the building that would prevent it from being converted to a residential building,
Not that we're aware of.
other than the large
New roof-
garages?
We just put a new roof on last year, gutters, but it's structurally sound and I mean.
There's no like excessive water pressure or?
No, nothing like that at all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Living right across from the police station. Wouldn't that be? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good ideas. I really don't have anything left to say today, but I will tell you that we are still concerned about the South Lake Mosquito Abatement District, and Trustee Eastman and I are tag teaming that. We have 2 residents who are still involved in the decennial committee. I did mention to Senator Julie Morrison that we would appreciate the statute being looked at so that we might have a seat at the table. So we might have a seat at the taxing body table. So just that continues, but as long as we have 2 Riverwoods residents, that being Rich Kumjian and Laura Trevino, attending all the meetings, taking part and leading discussions, I think that we're in a decent position. And as I say, Trustee Eastman and I have kind of tag teamed it, attending the board meetings. So Riverwoods has a voice, maybe not a vote, but a voice. So we'll just keep moving forward with that. New business. We're skipping past, we're removing rather the resolution pertaining to Saunders Road from the agenda tonight. You've heard Director Witt talk about that. So the first item of business is approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale of surplus personal property owned by the Village of Riverwoods. Chief Dano, would you like to lead us through that, please?
Yeah, the board recently approved the purchase of a new police vehicle this year, which we've acquired. We expect it to be ready to go onto the street in about 3 weeks. And at that point, we won't have any use for the 2021 Dodge Durango that it's replacing. So we'd like to approve an ordinance to be able to sell the car at Obanoff auction.
Okay, do I have a motion to waive first reading?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Hey, is there any discussion? All in favor of waiving first reading, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Do I have a motion for second reading and approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any other comments or questions about this? Okay, roll call, please.
Trustee Dickin?
Aye.
Trustee Eastmond?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson? Trustee Smith?
Aye.
Trustee Clayton?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next order of business is approval of an ordinance amending the special use permit granted for the operation of the Riverwoods Montessori School. Director Witt, would you like to refresh our memories on that, please?
Certainly, Mayor. So what the school is looking to accomplish through this amendment to the special use permit is the construction of a two-car garage, essentially no different than a single-family residential garage, to be located slightly north of the smaller square building on the property at the east end of the parking lot. The position, the lighting of the garage, and the other proposals are deemed at this point to be code compliant, though we have not seen the actual permit application yet because they need the approval in order to move forward with that. I know there were some concerns that we've had in previous meetings with regard to exterior lighting on the campus, whether it be parking lot or building. I have been to the site, I've looked at the conditions and deemed that each of those conditions as well have been code compliant. And I know that the applicants have been trying to work with the neighbors toward resolution of other issues that may be out on that property. And I think that's where we are tonight.
Do I have a motion for to waive first reading of the ordinance? It's an ordinance. Do I first and second? Okay. See, I knew it. Okay. Motion to waive first reading, please. Seeing none. Where do we go?
The board doesn't have to act on the ordinance. You have received a report of the Plan Commission. I think at least a motion to, I mean, someone could move to deny the granting of the special use, and at least at this point you would have some action in response to the report that you've received from the Plan Commission. I think the petitioner should have some kind of closure as to what the decision is. So if there's a motion to waive first reading or approve, that's one way to go. Another would be a motion to deny the special use, and that would also then need a second, and that wouldn't be an ordinance, but it would be an expression of the board's intent.
Trustee Hollander.
I would move that we approve the submitted Plan Commission's recommendations.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry. In accepting the Plan Commission's recommendations, is that in the same equivalent as a motion to waive first reading and proceed with the ordinance as drafted?
No.
Which grants the special use, because the Plan Commission recommended granting the special use, so.
Correct. And I'm saying that the board would accept their recommendation.
Right, but in order to implement it, we do need an ordinance at some point. So if you want that motion first, then we still would have to come back with an ordinance. I'm just, procedurally, that doesn't accomplish for the petitioner other than expressing the state of mind of the board. We still need, in order for the petitioner to move forward, they need either the ordinance approved or not approved.
I agree.
Okay, so
then I will move that we deny the ordinance.
was there a second to?
Second.
There was a second to.
Motion on the floor. Do you want to?
That I would like to form an ordinance as per what the Plan Commission's recommendations were.
Okay, so if we approve first reading, we continue to move forward. If first reading is denied, voted against, it's over. Is that how I read? Is that my understanding?
Are you comfortable that your motion is a motion for first reading of the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
So.
And do you accept that?
I accept that.
So the motion on the floor is for first reading of the ordinance that's in the packet, amending the special use permit granted for the operation of the Montessori school.
Okay, and is it as I?
Question.
Not to waive first.
No, it was a motion for first reading.
For first reading?
No.
Okay.
My interest is giving this the maximum amount of discussion time possible and waiving first reading means that we don't have two cracks at it.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor for first reading of this ordinance. And there has been a second. Is that an all in favor?
No, no, well, it would be unless there's more discussion.
Right. Is there any discussion on this motion?
I will plead ignorance. I don't know what you're asking me to approve.
All right. So under our village code, ordinances have a first reading and a second reading unless the first reading is waived. When an applicant asks for an amendment to a special use, the requirement is that the amendment be accomplished through an ordinance. So the applicant came through the Plan Commission. There was a recommendation by the Plan Commission that the special use be approved. At the last meeting, the board directed that we prepare an ordinance that would effectuate that by granting the special use and include conditions that the board mentioned. So in the packet, there is a draft ordinance, a proposed ordinance that would grant the special use that includes conditions. At this point, the trustees, the board can proceed with a first reading only, in which case, if there's a motion for second reading and the motion fails, then the ordinance is not approved. If the motion for second reading is approved, then the ordinance passed. If there's a motion for second reading and the motion is tabled, it could be continued, or it could be continued until the next meeting. So I think Trustee Hollander is thinking that at least you could have discussion on motion for first reading. After that, you could see where the board is and determine whether there's support for a motion for second reading and adoption.
If the vote on the first reading is denied, that's as far as it goes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is there a roll call on this, or is this voice vote?
You can, any trustee can request a roll call vote on any matter like this.
But if we want,
Trustee
but if we want
Jamerson.
to talk about it, now is the time to do that.
Discussion is, right.
Okay.
Let's talk about it.
All right. Motion for first reading is on the floor, has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Well, they're just asking for discussion before the motion.
Oh, okay. Discussion, go ahead.
Just, Clifford, I'm
Because we're
trying
discussing
to,
the motion right now,
I'm
right?
trying to
Okay,
allow the
thank you.
board and the public to have the maximum ability to present their views if this allows us the maximum capability.
Now I
That's the
understand that.
purpose.
Thank
I mean,
you.
I know where I would like to vote, but I want to allow the maximum amount of input.
Okay.
If I may,
Yes.
just because we have the ordinance in the packet, I didn't introduce it after Director Witt. For some in the audience who, I don't know if they've all looked at it in the packet, I just want to point out what the ordinance says. It refers to the report that the Plan Commission transmitted. It authorizes the construction of the garage on the property in accordance with the site plan that was provided to the board at the last meeting. The garage's dimensions of 24 by 24 feet. It amends the previous ordinances which had approved uses on the Montessori property, which limited the number of buildings to 2 buildings. And it replaces that language with language that allows the garage to exist, and then says at such time as the special use would terminate, there still can be only one principal building and one accessory building. Now that there are 3 buildings, we had to adjust the language because before it said if the smaller of the 2 buildings remains, it has to be demolished, so there's only 1 building. So now this ordinance would suggest that with 3 buildings, if the special use terminated, the larger building and in effect, the garage could remain. The other change is to make sure that the property conforms to the current exterior lighting ordinance, which wasn't around in 1999 when this was first adopted. And then there are a number of conditions. The conditions are that the garage is to be constructed to match the style of the exterior elevation, which was attached to the ordinance, and with the gable end of the garage oriented to the east. I remember the discussion about minimizing the appearance of the garage by orienting it in that direction. There's a requirement that construction be completed no later than May 1st, 2025. The next condition relates to screening, that screening trees, native pine trees, arbor vitae, or other evergreen species approved by the village ecologist should be planted no later than May 1st. in an area on the property approved by the village ecologist for the purpose of providing a visual buffer between the garage and homes on Chippewa Path nearest to the property. Such trees shall be selected for survivability and growth patterns sufficient to create an effective visual buffer that will lessen the direct view of the garage. The applicant shall be required to plant, maintain, prune, and replace such trees as necessary to maintain the visual buffer. Next condition relates to exterior lighting, that it complies with the newer residential outdoor lighting ordinance. This is the ordinance we passed some years ago that requires that exterior lighting fixtures, that the bulb be shielded or screened in some fashion so that you have no direct view of that from an adjacent property. And finally, it adds that any violation of the conditions set forth in this ordinance shall authorize the revocation of the special use. So those conditions weren't before the board before. We had discussed them. Those were staff's efforts at trying to incorporate what you would ask us to do.
Okay, this is the time for discussion then? Okay. Let's go. Trustee Clayton.
I just have a few questions perhaps for Director Witt. I'm trying to go through the concerns that the neighbors expressed in their email. And one of them was water drainage from pond and other water runoff. Does that pertain specifically to this project, or is that a general concern?
That would be a general concern.
And when you went to try to identify any landscaping waste being disposed of in the neighbors' yards, we could not identify any, right?
That is correct.
In terms of increased traffic, was there any issue with the fact that traffic would increase, or this was just the storage of existing vehicles?
I think the issue at hand with that particular comment, I could be wrong. My interpretation of that comment was, would there be additional traffic due to the presence of the truck on the site? But the truck's already been on the site, so the fact that the garage is going in would not affect that or change that.
Okay, thank you.
Other trustee comments, please? Trustee Smith.
Yeah, so I think, Trustee Clayton, there were a few things there. One is the history of the Riverwoods Montessori School and the angst that has caused neighbors for over 20 years. So some of this is not just necessarily because of the garage, but because of the way it was allowed to expand so dramatically in, I'm going to say 2000, might have been 99, I don't quite remember. So there was a lot of angst around that because many of the neighbors have been there since before that time. Not all, but many have been there for a long time. And the way that the Montessori school is positioned on the property, it most directly impacts the homes on Indian Trails and Chippewa Pathway. So, there's, I don't want to say concerned about that. It kind of is what it is at this point. But I will say that the neighbors and the residents on Chippewa Pathway and Indian Trails do not feel the need to be further burdened by the Riverwoods Montessori School. I think the other things that are kind of at hand is that there's two buildings already that are kind of incongruent with a residential neighborhood. It's a special use, the zoning is for special use, but everything around it is residential R1. So there's concern about that. And there's concern about adding another building. I think the other things that are kind of most pertinent, if you will, is that the neighbors did a petition, and of the 6 homes that are directly adjacent to Riverwoods Montessori School, all 6 of those homes have asked for this to be denied. As we went further, and that's including both Indian Trail, Chippewa Pathway, and the home closest to the Riverwoods Montessori School on Vernon Trail. There are some other homes on Vernon Trail that I've heard about that are kind of neutral, but nobody's positive that I spoke with or that has spoken with me. So there's just kind of this overriding concern of why. There are, like I said, there were the 6 directly adjacent properties that signed a petition saying, no, thank you. There were 33 residents that said, no, thank you. 31 in Indian Trails, 1 on Vernon Trail. 22 properties, primarily in Indian Trails, that said, yeah, no thanks. We don't need this to be bigger, don't need this to be a bigger burden to our neighbors. And I think the other thing is that it's, you know, the items that you identified clearly are a combination of new building of garage plus the history of the property. You may recall that there were lawsuits back in 1999. At that time, the Montessori school said they were going to increase students by 6 to 8. So that would put it at 75 to 80. Then they wanted 225. Ultimately got settled at 120. But clearly there are just concerns about the overall size of the building, the size of the population that is there, and the impact on Riverwoods, the Riverwoods neighborhoods. I think the other things that are kind of pertinent are, I'm really getting at the idea that even some people on Vernon Trail said, hey, if they wouldn't have bought their homes if they knew the Riverwoods Montessori School was going to be what it became. So I think there's just a lot of issues at hand, a lot of, quite honestly, bad feelings. And the other thing that we found interesting, I should say the neighbors, and obviously I'm a neighbor. I think we've discussed that fully before. I'm a neighbor. My wife and I are impacted. Some of our other neighbors that are impacted are here as well. The other thing that we found interesting was they applied to the Village of Riverwoods on late March for this amendment to their special use ordinance. They didn't contact the people on Indian Trails until early to mid-July. It was probably early July. I think it was July 9. So there's just this whole thing about it's kind of getting rushed, or it feels like it's getting rushed. And they're asking for a quick decision so they can build quickly. We haven't seen what the property will look like. Right now, as you can imagine, all the trees, combination of oak, buckthorn, whatever's there, is all fully leafed out. It's really hard to tell what it's going to look like, but the people on Chippewa Pathway are really concerned by having another building they're going to have to look at. And if you think about a 24 by 24 garage, now we've talked a little bit about, is the roof situated north, south, east, west, all that stuff. But to plant trees to not impact those homes that are closest to it, they're gonna have to be like 20 feet tall. Our home is a 2-story home. We see the smaller of the 2 school buildings all night, every night. Lights are on all night, every night. They've been good about the parking lot. We raised a concern when the parking lot was on. They were good about that, but we're just overly concerned, not overly, but we're concerned about allowing another building to be added to the property, which we feel like is overbuilt to start with. I think, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. There's some neighbors here today. I don't know if Mayor Ford, if we want to allow them to speak now or perhaps later. But I think it'd be beneficial for the trustees to hear not only what does Jeff believe, but what do the neighbors believe.
I would ask for trustee comments first, and then, of course, we will ask for anyone else wishing to address the board on the topic.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, trustee Eastman, please.
So I would just add that I very much appreciate the neighbors coming to us and expressing their concerns. I can fully understand why they are concerned about that. I appreciate Jeff's advocacy on behalf of his neighbors. But I think both the Plan Commission and the board have made every effort to reconcile those things and to come up with an ordinance that wouldn't be unduly burdensome on the neighbors. I would ask that people, kind of think of the bigger picture here. I can speak from my own personal experience that part of the reason why I moved to Riverwoods is both my wife and I worked. My wife was a physician, and having access to early childcare, we moved when my son was 2, was really important to us. Post-COVID, that's been a lot harder for families to find. I, take it maybe up a level and think that because we have this facility in our village, that may actually prop up people's home prices and add to the value of not just this neighborhood, but the whole village. And I would ask that, I think they've been good neighbors. I would ask people to keep in perspective that in fact it is a garage. I can fully understand, having spent an awful lot of time on that property over many years, why they would want to put some of the wooden benches and things and actually store them inside, because a lot of those things do rot over time. Can understand why they would want to have their truck to be put inside. It's a garage. I think I get it, but at the same time, I think we've tried to mitigate the risk. And I do think that, providing childcare is so important for broader goals that we're trying to accomplish both in our village and just in our society in general. That's it.
May I just add one more comment?
Trustee Smith, please.
And Trustee Eastman, let us be clear, we're not against the school in of itself or the services they provide. We're not trying to suggest that there shouldn't be a place for children to go to school that is an alternative to either public or other preschool or primary school education. That is not the issue. The issue is another building, and it's a garage. And most schools in the north suburbs do not have garages.
I guess my response to that would be weigh, what a business would want in terms of protecting their capital stock and, also ensuring that, snow removal equipment, other things are stored inside. I like I say, I'm familiar with that property and I know where it'll be tucked back in. And I also know where that big berm is in the back. I just don't see the burden. I understand it's a bit of a burden, but I just don't see it as great of a burden as people are making it out to be. But that is my perspective, and I only have one vote.
Trustee Hollander, please.
The history of the concerns of the residents with the school are noted, but the board is presented with an ordinance for the garage, not for what's happened before or why something wasn't addressed or any other issue. And I think that we have to stick to what is presented before us and decide whether or not the garage in and of itself, with the remedies that were brought up by the residents and now it looked like have been at least attempted to be addressed by the village. And to me, that's the issue, not anything else which has been there historically. And I think that's what we have to restrict our conversation to.
Trustee Clayton.
I also would add that I think it's important to recognize that the Plan Commission has approved this, and we need to have a very compelling reason, strategic reason, to override the decision of the Plan Commission. That's the role of the board, not to redo everything that the Plan Commission did, as I understand our role and their role. So at this particular point, we have someone who's trying to have the use of their property to undertake a business decision that is a garage. I'm having a great deal of difficulty getting the degree of emotion and angst, and I appreciate the fact that people feel really strongly about this. I'm not getting it.
Trustee Jamerson, please.
I do agree with Trustee Clayton that, the Plan Commission has done their due diligence. They've had their hearings. And I think that we as a body have to it's our role to use them as they are meant to be used, and they have sent us a recommendation in favor of this project. And I think that's what our role is. I agree 100%.
Okay. Trustee Dickin.
Yes, I wanted to echo Trustee Eastman's comments regarding the fact that this is indeed a needed entity in the community. And I think we really value the fact that there is a place to send our children. But the request for building this garage is in fact adding yet another structure to a lot, to a parcel that already has a lot of impermeable surface. I've actually made an effort to drive there, and we've visited this place a number of occasions over the years as our kids were growing up, and I'm familiar with the geography. I'm familiar with the elevations. I do understand the intent to plant trees to develop a year-round blockage of a view. But at the same time, I would respectfully disagree with the Plan Commissioner's recommendation to allow for this to be built.
Any other comments from the board? Do we have any visitors wishing to address the board on this topic? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward and say your name. I will say that generally we, when there's a controversial subject, we allow 3 minutes for comments, but please, we'll be a little flexible this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me? All right. My name's Noreen McCartan, and I live at 1480 Chippewa Pathway. So I also am a neighbor of this project. One of the things that I don't hear is that the special use permit for this business is for a school. It's not for a garage. And I think that it's important to also look at this amendment as it is written. I think the amendment as it is written does not put the case for the village best interest in this project. In fact, I think it actually fails to do that and contradicts itself. If this is the village's best case to support this project, it doesn't achieve that as it's drafted. So if the trustees have this in front of them, I'd appreciate you looking at it. But what I'd like to do is take a look at the justification that the village is putting forth for this project. I think that is the trustees' responsibility to say, this is our best case for this project. And so section 1 says, the statements and findings contained in the recitals to this ordinance are found to be true and correct. If that is so, then the amendment is, logistically good. But go to the second paragraph on that page, and there are some significant problems. First of all, it says that the Board of Trustees determined that the best interest of the village will be served. So we have to look at that. What is the best interest of the village? It then lays out what the reasons for this best interest. The first thing that it says is that the amendment will provide enclosure and protection for the school's vehicles and accessory equipment used in the operation of the property and reduce opportunity for theft associated with outdoor parking and storage. So that first item, the protection of the school's vehicles and accessory equipment, that is the business's obligation. It is not the village's. While the village wants to support businesses, we want to give a safe, environment. The village is not in the business of protecting businesses' equipment. That is the business of the business. The other issue is that when I visited the Montessori school, their equipment is protected. It's in sheds, it's in large storage containers on the property. I did not see any accessories out and about. Maybe the wooden benches are more fragile, but I think there's probably places they can store those in the school. So I think that's a significant issue, that this is not the village's problem. It's not in the village's best interest. The other thing is that the operation of the property and reduce the opportunity for theft associated with outdoor parking and storage. Again, that was the concern that the school had. It wasn't a concern of the village. And I think the other thing is that this is a legal document, and that's a presumption. And any presumption in a legal document should be backed up with facts. I did not hear any facts in terms of the school being subject to theft, vandalism, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, we live in a very safe community. I understand that there was some damage to mailboxes. It happened to ours, it happened to the school, but that's really, as the good police officers told me, they said, these are kids and this happens. So that is a presumption. It's not based by fact. And if this amendment relies on those two issues to support it and to sort of suggest that the village, then these items are in the best interest of the village, it's just not a fact. They are in the best interest of the school. And is that necessarily the best interest of the village? And I would suggest that it isn't. So the other thing that, in fact, are true and correct, as I mentioned, is that the school's accessories are already housed, secure, and safe, that the vehicle has not needed a garage for the last umpteen years. And I think the other thing that is true is that the neighbors are against this. Sorry, this is kind of like, to me, this is always a little stressful. Sorry about that. So I guess that's my concern, is that the amendment itself doesn't make its case. It doesn't make the case that this is the village best interest. It actually, the items that it puts forth are belied. They are not substantive. There are no facts for this presumption that is supposed to sort of buttress this village. Buttress that idea. So the other thing that I would say is that if you look at the page 3, section 6, it talks about the amendment, and it says the amendment of the special use is deemed beneficial for the public convenience at that location. I'm not sure exactly how the public is made convenient by this garage. I know that the business is, and I did reach out to Doug because I thought the last time we were here it was somewhat contentious, and I wanted to make sure that they knew we were good neighbors and that our interests were not personal. And the other thing is that the amendment of the special use is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, morals, and welfare are protected. But in this instant, the only element there is safety. And again, that presumption is not supported by the facts of this case. There's no facts that suggest that having a car parked in a parking lot is necessarily going to, one, engender theft, that there has been a history of theft or vandalism in that area. And I think that the amendment has to, it can't stand as it's written. It just doesn't support that this is in the best interest of the village. It says clearly that it's in the best interest of the business. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for listening.
I'd like to ask a question. Director Witt, do you recall how many outbuildings or structures are on the property? I've heard mention of a shed and other things. Are there other outbuildings that would disappear as a result of this?
In my conversation with the Cambics, no, there is no intent that anything else is actually removed from the property.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other visitors wishing to address the board? Yes, ma'am. Come up, please state your name. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Colleen Smith. I'm at 1450 Chippewa Pathway, right behind the Montessori School. Just a few things. So we've been in our house about 30 years. When we bought our house, there was the little schoolhouse and a building behind it. We bought it with that. 23 years later, they had put in the big red building, lights on all the time. The other building we're always used to. So now they want to put in another building. We'll be looking at 3 structures from our house. As the saying goes, as long as it's not in your backyard, it's in our backyard. We'll be looking at it 7 months a year. I do have a couple of questions because I know everyone's talked and we've all talked our say and everything, but I don't know why they won't wait till after the leaves are down. It would give us a better perspective. Maybe we would be more accommodating. Maybe we would just have a better view on how things are going to look. But they're in a very big hurry to do this. As far as the vehicle goes, the vehicle's not there all the time. It's there sometimes. We see it. We know it's there. It's not there 7 days a week. I drive by it every time I come home from work when we're out and about, and I know it's not there all the time. And I want to know, I'm not sure about this, but how does the village know there's no other place to build a new garage on the property? I don't know that. Has anyone looked at that to try to discover if there's another area? I know the Cambridge says there isn't. I don't know that to be true, so that's a question. Also, there's also, the small building behind us that we look at. Why can they not repurpose that building, turn that into a 2-car garage? It's already there. They don't have to do any building, foundation, change it to a garage. Now, I know there might be a classroom in there and there might not. There's been some talk that there's nothing there right now, and I don't know that to be true. But if there is, why don't they move to the big school and have everybody together? It seems like us, the surrounding neighbors, are being compromised again. We were 23 years ago with the big building going in, and now it seems like we're being asked again to compromise. Again, as long as it's not in your backyard, it's in our backyard. I thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it possible to address the question on, is there another site on the property to build?
Your Honor, in my role as building official, it's not my duty to search for locations on that property. What my duty is to determine whether or not the garage and the construction and location would be in compliance with the village's building, zoning, and stormwater codes. And that particular location, in the event that the drawings are brought forth, that I would anticipate to see, that project would be compliant with each of those in that location.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the trustees? Are there visitors wishing to address the board? Yes, please come forward and state your name.
Good evening. My name is Doug Cambick, 3140 Riverwoods Road from the Riverwoods Montessori School. Joining me is also Tony Cambick. We run the Montessori School. We own the property there. And I just wanted to address some of the questions of things that were brought up that I think deserve to be answered, so you hear both sides of all stories. I think there was a question just recently about the secondary building on our property, of repurposing that to a garage. That actually is a specifically built out building for our youngest children at that school. So those are classrooms in that building. So the thought of just tearing out classrooms to make way for garages, it would be nonsensical to do, and displace children that we wouldn't have somewhere else to put them. I appreciate the focus of many of the trustees that have brought up that we're here to talk about what's going on today about a garage. A 24 by 24 square foot, 24 by 24 garage, a residential garage, something you would see in your neighborhoods. You know, your neighbors might be doing something with their home, or questions about impervious surfaces. We have a lot of land on our property. We in no way get close to even ratios of pushing thresholds of taking up too much impervious surface. needs change for individuals, families, schools. For example, I know for the Smiths, you built an addition to your home and added another garage to your home. Was there a concern about impervious surface or neighbors seeing your lights or your concern? I think one of the things we've done is we've met with Director Witt at our property. We've also met with Steve Zimmerman, the school, the village
ecologist.
Ecologist, yes, thank you. To try to address, how can we help to mitigate the concerns of neighbors? And I think in reality, what it comes down is people just don't want to see a garage. Okay, we understand. I do have a hard time thinking about, your family's lived there for 30 years, and it sounds unbearable to see our school, but yet sometimes I wonder then, why did you not take any effort to maybe plant one or two pine trees in your own yard so you wouldn't have to look at our school? It's not incumbent upon you, but we hear today it's like such a horrible thing to see our school. I don't believe it is. I really don't believe that's the case. We did work to look at sight lines to see where somebody's home might be potentially looking at a garage. And as we've said previously, our intent is to help to be good neighbors and to help buffer that and to plant year-round types of tree specimens, not just deciduous trees that drop leaves, but things that would be more evergreens, arborvitaes, things like that. So that way, I think it helps to buffer year-round. I do want to bring up a question that some people have suggested, which is a falsehood. The Vernon Trail neighborhood, David Ritter, who is the president, I think spoke to you. He spoke at the Plan Commission, and as well as he spoke at the last meeting here. I think there was something was being brought up about saying there was perhaps neighbors there that didn't want this to happen. We met with all of them. He met with all of them. He discussed this with all of them, and they are in favor and they do support us. So I'm not sure why that hearsay of saying that there's maybe some question about it. That simply is just not the facts. As far as our neighbors go, Noreen, I do appreciate the email that you did send me. I think it was September 20th after our last meeting. And I think as part of that email, I think it was an acknowledgement of we are good neighbors and we do work hard to be a good part of this community. And your pledge was to work together with us as this process moves forward so it can be beneficial for all. And that's our pledge too, and it always has been our pledge. And as far as the question of timeline and a suggestion of this trying to be slammed through quickly, the initial discussion started back in March with the village. And the reason I started that, just because I knew it was going to take time. This wasn't going to be, I can hand in a request for a special use, or pardon me, for a garage building permit. I knew there was conditions or a special use permit. And that was going to take some time for Director Witt to do some research and to look into this and understand the big picture, because he was not here when the special use was granted originally in 1986 and amended in 1997, I believe it was. So that took some time, and then there was things that were needed. There was some back and forth, things like that. But we did reach out to our neighbors. We reached out to the Smiths specifically also in July because we knew you might be impacted by this and invited you guys to come and meet with us. Nobody did. The first time we heard anything from you was at the Plan Commission meeting from, I believe it was your wife that spoke. So we have tried to reach out to people. And I think really it's one household. It's your home that has probably the most direct view. Most everybody else doesn't even see it. And I don't think it's an undue burden on the community. I think it's something very wise that, our school does have something like this to protect our assets. And sure, yes, there are plenty of other schools that do have garages. I think if you just go north, just after Duffy, there's a church there, and they also have a school. And you can see by their equipment and playground equipment, there is a garage for them too. So this is not at all an unusual request to have a garage to house things like your vehicle, equipment, things like that. So we're here to ask for your approval, and we appreciate your consideration. And we do ask that you vote yes to support the amendment to our special use, allowing us to build this garage.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Ford. And
Trustee Smith, please.
And Tony, I would say it's not hearsay that people on Vernon Trails aren't thrilled about this. There was a signed petition from your neighbor directly north of your school that said no.
No, it was not.
Are you calling me dishonest?
Okay. All right, time.
Mayor, can I ask for a call to question?
Okay.
Move for second, I move for second reading and adoption.
Well, you can't,
Wait,
there's a
wait,
motion
first
on the
reading.
floor.
We'd have to,
Oh, we have
Vote
to
on the
do the
first.
first
Yeah,
reading.
we got to do the
Sorry.
first reading.
Sorry.
I move that we vote on this.
Okay, and I think this is, would this be a voice vote or,
You can do a voice vote, but if you don't, if you can't ascertain the yeses and the nos, then you'll need to do a roll call, so.
I just want to do a roll call just straight up. Okay, roll call, please. This is on the first reading.
Trustee Eastmond?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jameson?
Aye.
Trustee Smith?
Nay.
Clayton?
Aye.
Trustee Dickin?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Okay, that was the first reading. So now if you'd like to,
I would move that we proceed to the second reading.
okay, that
And adoption.
second reading and adoption. Okay, is there any further discussion?
Oh, wait, there's no second.
Oh, sorry. I thought I
There's 2
heard it.
seconds down there.
Yeah, okay. No other comments from our board? Roll call, please.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jameson?
Aye.
Trustee Smith?
Nay.
Trustee Clayton?
Aye.
Trustee Dickin?
Nay.
Trustee Eastmond?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Moving on. Next order of business is the discussion of a proposed amendment to the code restricting the burning of yard waste. May I please ask Director Witt to go over some of the information that he's prepared and in your board packet on the issue of burning.
Certainly, Mayor, thank you. So at the last village board meeting that was held on October 1st, staff was asked to gather information on how other communities address the issue of open burning, particularly related to the burning of landscape waste. I did a review of our local communities, including Bannockburn, Buffalo Grove, Deerfield, Lincolnshire, Northbrook, unincorporated Lake County, and ourselves. The chart that's in the packet with my memorandum would indicate that with the exception of Deerfield and Northbrook, which do allow burning of grass clippings and other yard waste only through the approval of the fire chief in both those communities, the only other location that approves burning would be unincorporated Lake County. However, it should be noted that burning of grass clippings or leaves is not permitted in unincorporated Cook County. And they also have in unincorporated Lake County, I should say, I apologize, in unincorporated Lake County, in order to burn other things such as brush or trimmings from trees, shrubs, or logs, essentially a woody waste. The county requires people to use what is called an air curtain destructor, of which I provided a little information packet in there, which is essentially something that's probably larger generally than a 40-yard dumpster, which blows air across the top. People throw in the logs and the brush and everything else they want to burn. They douse it with diesel fuel. They light it on fire. And then and once that starts burning, they turn on the ventilating aspect of this machine, which provides an air curtain across the top of the opening, which prevents any of the carbon particulates from escaping. There's an example in one of the photographs of an open burn in the distance, and then people using this air curtain destructor in the foreground. So essentially, the county will allow it, but it has to be done in accordance with IEPA regulations and is required to use this air curtain destructor. Now, you can kind of manipulate and make your own type of thing by digging a trench in your backyard and coming up with a mechanical system that forces air to provide that same level of protection. But it seems that the county itself, their regulations are fairly critical. Now, each of the communities may have different reasons why they do allow things to occur. One exception I should add in here is that Bannockburn does allow burning of only the woody materials. They don't allow it for grass clippings or leaves. But that also comes, each of the communities that do allow this to occur has a multitude of criteria behind it. So essentially, we have we have Bannockburn that would allow the brush, Buffalo Grove that outright bans it, Deerfield will allow things, the exception with the approval of the fire chief, Lincolnshire outright no. Northbrook again has to be approved by the fire chief, and they need a waiver from the state that the environmental protection regulations are being met. Unincorporated Lake County does not allow non-woody, meaning grass clippings or leaves. Woody things they do allow, but they have this extensive list of requirements. And then the Village of Riverwoods allows both to occur with certain restrictions. So if anybody wants any particulars for any of the individual municipalities, I have them I have some of that in front of me, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that the board may have.
Are there any questions from the board at this point? Trustee Hollander?
Thank you for the graph and the other communities. The one thing a couple things. One, Riverwoods, the environment is a little bit different than they are in some of the other communities. At least half of Riverwoods is heavily wooded, and our need for burning leaves may be greater than some where the trees aren't as extensive. Second of all, a lot of other communities have them put the leaves in the street by the sidewalks, and they have a vacuum truck that goes by and picks up this stuff. We don't really have that. So other communities have different ways of approaching this problem. I read through the restrictions that the requirements that we have with burning regarding time limitations and heavy smoke, and someone has to be present, you have to have a water source. It seems like we've had a reasonable approach to having people burn without a permit as long as they follow the rules. It seems to me that the biggest problem is some people don't follow rules, and therefore we have difficulties. And like many other ordinances in the village, we tend to rely on other people calling the police or the village and saying, my neighbor or someone down the street isn't doing what they're supposed to do, please take care of it. And I think that this is probably one of those instances where individuals who are not following the rules need to be reported, and then we follow up with it. We've had this ordinance 10 years or more. I think people enjoy the convenience of it, and it seems to be relatively safe if it's done the right way. When I read through this and I looked for changes that I would think would be positive, I really couldn't think of any. Maybe someone else can, and it's reasonable to review these ordinances, but I don't see anything we need to make a change on.
Trustee Clayton?
I just want to second what Trustee Hollander said.
Oh, Trustee Jamerson?
I would like to add to Trustee Hollander's comments that, the Village of Riverwoods, because it's at least where I live, if I put leaves in bags, you wouldn't be able to see my house. There'd be so many bags. And the garbage people don't collect those. I mean, as far as I know, maybe they're supposed to. I don't know what the contract says. I should, I'm sure.
Waste.
But not by us. Not by us. There's 2 trucks that come by us. That's it, all year round. So if I put those bags out there, now I don't burn my leaves. I compost them. I think that to Trustee Hollander's comments, I mean, I think that there's bad apples everywhere. And, if they're burning logs, I mean, maybe a restriction could be put on the size of what they're burning that might help the issue. But other than that, I don't think there's a need to change our ordinance.
I not supposed to comment, but I would just ask the trustees also to consider that there was a really good article in the RPC newsletter, and it talked about eco-friendly ways of getting rid of leaves. And I've lived here for over 40 years, and we've never burned and never had a problem. They blow into the woods, and then we do a burn every 5 years or so. So there are ways to do that. I would ask the board also to consider the fact that a third of the village is on well, and there are not fire hydrants handy in every single neighborhood. And so it would be a concern. So with that, Trustee Eastman, I think I saw your name.
Yeah, you stole my thunder there. I was going to ask Lori what RPC recommends in terms of leaf disposal and dealing with that. And I think we have an article that talks about that. And then my other point is I really do think it probably is an enforcement problem. I mean, you could go to where, leaf burning certainly gives off more smoke than, say, burning buckthorn or small pieces of wood. I mean, that might be a change, but I also understand that there are certain people that see that as something that they want to do with their property, or they just have so many leaves. But I think it's more of, we do have an ordinance, we do have rules in place. It's going to be assuring residents that we're enforcing when people aren't following those rules. And we have a plan in place where they know where to report it efficiently, so it doesn't unduly burden the police station, and they know where to go and where it will be promptly addressed.
Trustee Smith, did you have your hand up by there?
All I was going to say is if we allow prescribed burns, it feels odd to me that we would not allow people to burn buckthorn and leaves and grass. It just feels like, I think as Trustee Clayton and Jamerson and others have said, it seems like we're trying to regulate one bad apple, and I think we should just enforce it versus create more legislation, or excuse me, more ordinances that will be difficult to manage.
Does the fire chief have something to say about people burning stuff?
Do you love yard waste burning? Tell me about it. You like fire, right? Oh.
Here we go. So we cover multiple different jurisdictions, and we rely on the local ordinances and either the sheriff or the local police department to enforce those. Now, we do get called out. They were supposed to call the fire department prior to burning, and then we'll advise them, make sure you know what your ordinance is, and most ordinances have to have a water supply nearby. But as a fire department, anytime you start a fire, you're going to have the potentiality of fire risk, especially these days when there hasn't rained, or except for today. But really dry conditions, and like you said, there's a couple of bad actors out there that make it that one bad time and ruin it for everybody. So we have been called out for health concerns. Somebody doesn't like to smoke, or if we get multiple calls, we will extinguish the fire if it's too close. We have all the ordinances in our vehicles that we'll look up, because we don't memorize all of them, but we know pretty much most of them. But we do see an inherent safety risk. We will extinguish the fire, and then if the resident wants to complain, then they need to go to the local authorities to do that. So, but we don't recommend burning. As much as a firefighter, no, I'm not going to say it. We're good.
Yeah. I think there's also some information about particulates in the air. I know when we were going to have a distribution center right off of Saunders Road, there was concern about idling trucks and particulates in the air. So I would think that burning might create those as well. I know I've had occasion to call the police department when there was a fire, a legitimate fire across Deerfield Road down a little bit, and officer went over and said, well, they can do it because all the constraints of the ordinance were being met, but the smoke was really thick and, very hazy. So that would be my continuing concern, as well as with all the trees and all the leaves, how do you control a spark? So I would be concerned about the health and safety issue. And if we decide to move forward with an ordinance change or not, just for your consideration. Trustee Dickin, please.
Yeah, I appreciate the comparison chart. I was really curious to see what Bannockburn was doing because they seem like a nearby municipality that most closely reflects Riverwoods in terms of property sizes and the amount of woodlands they contain on their properties, and they're completely different than we are. I think at the end of the day, if we have an ordinance, we need to enforce it. My only recommendation to what we currently have in place would be to perhaps expand a little bit on weather conditions, things such as wind speed, and perhaps not allowing to burn, I don't know, 5 days after it rains, because wet things create smoke.
So enforcement would include a weather forecast. Chief, how you doing? Trustee Hollander, please.
Right now, I believe the mayor or any two trustees can determine that the weather is inappropriate for burning. So that's in the ordinance now.
Really?
Yeah, you get new power.
Oh my God. I didn't.
I would make a recommendation that there be no further recommend that we do not propose a new amendment at this point in time. But I would recommend that maybe twice a year an article goes into the Riverwoods newsletter about fire safety as a routine every 6 months or maybe twice during the summer, spring and fall, something like that.
I think we just did that, didn't
Because
we?
our problem appears to be more occasional bad apple than a suburb-wide issue.
Are there visitors wishing to address the board on the issue? We've got one in the back and we've got our chair creditor in the front. So you want to go first. Might still be on. Chief still, yeah. Okay.
Okay. 2 suggestions when you're looking at burning.
Yeah, grab it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I can't help it.
You
It's
know,
short.
the 8, the straight, the great, you know.
2 suggestions. One, we talk about bad apples who ignore ordinance. And if we're going to suggest that people contact the village when we have someone who's doing that, I think we should increase the penalties on such people. Because the only way you bite people who are bad apples, you take a bite of the apple. And I think if the penalties were higher and people were made aware of that, then our bad apples wouldn't spoil so rapidly. That's number one. And the other thing that you can do is you can limit days. I mean, we do it with water use. We say alternative days you can use water outside in the summertime. We should be able to say alternative days you can burn in the autumn and the spring, so that people who are being burdened by smoke aren't being burdened every day. If I thought of 2 things that would make our ordinance better and stronger, those would be the 2.
Thank you.
That's it.
Hello again. My name is Meg Radlewski. So I wanted to add a little bit more with regards to our perspective as neighbors. There were 20 of us that signed the petition because it really is a big issue for us. Occasional burning was not an issue. We've been here for 11 years now. Couple of hours here and there, maybe it would be acceptable. But we're talking 10, 12 hours a day for several days straight. This is really unbearable. So for me, fines, absolutely, that they would be helpful. Restricting the times of days, perhaps, to much shorter within the, right now, it's like 8 in the morning to 8 p.m. in the evening. And the fact of the matter is, as Chief Dano was kind enough to stop by one of the individuals that happened to burn all the time. And there was nothing you could do because the ordinance was followed. However, the elements of nuisance was really violated for us. And it's really clear, I checked the ordinances, and it's clear that if the nuisance is bothersome to that extent, that it violates the health and well-being and peace of the environment that you're in, that's obviously an issue. And so that contradicts the allowance for burning, right? So to me, health and well-being is more important than the freedom of burning. So I would like to have a little more consideration with that regard to how do we enforce it if it's left as is, as Chief Dano couldn't do anything about it because within the regulation it's allowed for the time being, and the nuisance was not being honored.
Can I ask a question?
Trustee Jamerson, sir.
So for both of you, since you were there also, yeah, what are they burning? Are they burning leaves? Are they burning
Everything.
logs? Well, I mean,
Everything. So it started, so let me, I explained last time, but a couple of years. Yes, no worries, no worries. So it started with debris from the construction, and those were massive fires, right? That triggered our alarm. A neighboring house, we were a neighboring house, in our house twice in the middle of the night, and we had the chief of police of the fire department come up in the middle of the night. So that was the extent. Then it became leaves, like debris, landscape debris, and now it's logs, massive amounts of logs. All the stuff that happened about a month ago with multiple trees that have, with the storm, they have been cut up into pieces, stored, and I presume are being regularly burned.
Okay.
And another 2 or 3 neighbors started to take pictures and videos as well, and it appears that the garbage on top of it is just thrown as an addition. So literally a day after the board meeting, the neighbor was literally started at 7:30 in the morning and continued to 6:30 in the night. And we had ash falling in several houses. That's how much burning that was.
okay, thank you.
Chief, did you want to add something?
Well, on this particular house, whenever my officers responded, they did report that there was smoke, but the only thing that we saw being burned, according to the reports, were trees. It is not legal to burn construction debris. If we had seen that, we would have acted. So we need to be called about that. The officers were watching for that, but we didn't detect any of that.
I would, if you had asked me, I guess I would have said that I'm not sure that trees are legal to burn. It says fallen leaves, twigs, brush, but not trees. So I'm not sure that if we need to have a conversation
I think
about
cut up
that.
trees they can burn.
I
don't have the ordinance in front of me. I thought they could. I'm reasonably certain it says that they can, but
I can confirm that there are large logs.
Yeah, was
Because I
there
live in
someone
the
in
area.
attendance
massive
that
logs.
during the 12 hours?
yes, they were.
Okay.
He was in attendance, and there was water source, and the
All right.
fire was not overly large.
Yeah, I looked for the word logs, I couldn't find any,
I don't think there's.
but
It basically says you can't burn. You can burn yard waste, but you can't burn.
There's a definition of
construction
landscape waste, which is fallen leaves, brush, twigs, sticks.
It is in fact not brush.
I mean,
So, so maybe if there was a change that was going to be made, we would maybe put a restriction on the size of the, I mean, if there was a restriction.
Well, I
mean, if
think,
you're burning a log or even a log, I don't think that's in I don't think that's why the ordinance was written, to be burning logs.
But then wouldn't that outlaw like a fire pit?
well, there's a
Somebody
special
was-
exception.
Well, there's a
for
special
a
exception.
A controlled enclosure.
Okay.
Well, I mean, how long do people normally start a fire and leave it going? Even for people who are longtime residents of Riverwoods and start a fire for leaves, what's a reasonable amount of time?
In this
I
part,
don't know. But we have a lot of leaves, and we do burn logs we used to burn logs during the Halloween.
I mean,
Here, the kids would roast marshmallows and we'd burn logs here.
I mean,
So, huh? Well,
I would say to
No,
my.
you don't want to harken back to that. That was, I mean, we got lucky. Let's just put it
Our
that
one
way.
physician on the board, I would say that I wonder if, given the problems that people have with health and particular pollution, that the stink that we were making about a logistics center and the prevalence of wildfire smoke and I guess the increased exposure and knowledge that we have today, whether any of that prompts a reconsideration of a long-standing custom in the village. I'm just posing the question.
I believe the dense smoke is not allowed. I mean, it's in there. That, of course, that's open to interpretation, but that was one of the
dense smoke,
restrictions.
does it say dense smoke is in there?
Yeah. I mean,
Seriously, when I called, it was dense smoke. But, you know, if the clearing is around, you know, clearing so many feet around, you know, and they're closer, frankly, they're closer than I was, and I was, you know, across the street and down the way, down a piece. I worry about frankly, I would just worry about the safety hazard. With so many leaves and so many trees, and just the fact that there are not hydrants in all parts of the village, how do you say one part of the village can burn and another part of the village cannot?
Right.
Would a fire hose put out the fire once it started going and if it became out of control? I just am concerned about the health and the fire
Well, so
I
maybe
mean-
it's more time, place, and manner, and having a fine that discourages it. I mean, if we're talking about what can we do? I mean, yes, we have a particular situation, but what can you do that applies to everyone,
You
right?
either allow fire or you don't. If you allow fire, how do you control fire so that it does not become a safety issue for neighbors and a neighborhood?
Well, that's a separate
That's
issue,
a
but.
question.
Right.
That's
Fair
the
enough.
question. If you do not burn, if you do not allow burning, then that's pretty simple and easy it's an easy enforcement. You're burning, you're not allowed.
But my thought is it seems like there's a sense a bit on the board of not wanting to go quite that far. But if that's the case, then can you discourage it by putting in a higher fine? That's something you could add to the existing ordinance.
Chair Gretitor made some good suggestions.
Yeah, exactly. And
Limitations on
maybe even
burning.
restricting it because what we've heard here is that, you know, it's been going on, and I've observed this as well, for lengthy periods of time. Maybe you just
Yeah.
have a window and you say, you know, you can't burn for more than, what is reasonable, 2 hours, 3 hours? I mean, I don't know how long.
That's, you know, how long has a fire been? You either have a day when you can burn on Wednesdays every other week, or you can't. I think asking our officers to go out there
Yeah.
and say, how long have you been, you know, have you been standing by this fire and watching it every minute?
Right.
You know, is that hose actually connected and do you have enough pressure to put out the fire? You know, let me see what you're burning. All those kinds of issues for our officers to, you know, how do they deal with it? If the limitations suggested by Chair Gretitor, you know, high fines and you can burn on Wednesdays or something like that, you know?
4 hours at a crack, no more than 4 hours.
Yeah.
So-
That's hard to enforce.
So,
Yeah.
can I ask you a
Trustee
question?
Smith, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, Bruce, the way I read it in 51G-6 penalty, it's no less than 75 and nor more than $750. Seems to me like $750 would be a reasonable person wouldn't want to incur that for burning logs all day. How is the penalty assessed and who assesses it? Is the police officer? Is it the size of the fire, the amount of smoke, whatever those things are?
Well, it could be a citation from a police officer. It could be something that it goes to administrative hearing court. And that's where the fine would be levied if the person's found liable. The citation would be written if the police officer has reason to believe that our regulations are not being followed. So if the size of the fire is larger than 5 by 5 by 5, if the officer observes that there's not a source of water nearby, if it's not being properly attended, if they're burning materials they're not supposed to be burning. If you take any one of those factors, the officer says, please stop, put this out, this isn't right. If they persist, the officer could write a citation.
Or up to $750.
Well, they write the citation for the violation, and then the hearing officer is the one that determines. The officer doesn't choose the fine amount, the hearing officer does. So and the hearing officer looks as whether it's a first violation, the second violation, whether the person
There's
was.
discretion. Well, I guess tying back to my point, and I'm not trying to beat this to death, but I would think $750 would stop me from burning buckthorn. Just to be honest.
You could hire a landscaper to come and get it for that, you know?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Which a lot of people do. We have a lot of issues with landscapers parking in the street, so.
That's a different issue.
Well,
That
I do
should be
think.
charged $750 too.
I do think that if we have some difference of opinion on what landscape waste means, we should be clear about that. Reading the language, just as it's written, it seems to pertain to leaves and small materials.
Right.
Can I
think
add something to that, though? Yes, the ordinance does talk about that with regard to landscape waste. However, the definition of a fire pit or a fire ring immediately above that definition allows wood logs to be burned if it's in a container in an enclosure designed to contain fire. In this particular case, the photographs that I saw, because I couldn't see anything when I drove by, but the photographs that I saw appeared to have an enclosure in which the logs were inside. So even though they might have been burning leaves and twigs and everything else, the burning of the logs inside the enclosure would be permitted underneath this ordinance.
No, I disagree.
Why?
Because it's supposed to be a fire ring that is commonly utilized for providing outdoor source of warmth as a campfire for outdoor gatherings, not as a method of disposing of materials. So the nature of that use is episodic. It's occasional. People don't conduct an outdoor gathering around a fire pit every day.
So you'd have to get about 8 or 10 of your neighbors to
this is why we spend endless time drafting these things. But I mean, if the intent is to allow for limited burning of the kind of small landscape waste that we know is seasonal, and once it's burned, it's gone for the most part, I think that could be addressed in language a little bit better, but I don't believe that the intent was for people to be burning trees.
Well, I was obviously misreading it because I took that the logs were okay under the landscape waste, but maybe it could be clarified because that wasn't how I understood it when I first looked at it. So
I'd really like to talk to the person who drafted this ordinance.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to him.
Really would like to.
Can I make a
Chief? Did you? Yeah.
So, there's a lot of wording in here about things like it shall be deemed unlawful if it's conducted on a day in a manner that would take into consideration high temperatures, local wind speeds, extended periods of low precipitation, low moisture levels in the soil, and other related factors. So Chief Kruger had mentioned that he's gone by, or his crews, or probably you when you were a firefighter, have gone by some of these where they are following all the regulations, but they still have put the fire out. I understand from listening to the director of community services that other towns are saying that they need to get permission from the fire department first. I think the fire department would be better qualified to look at all these factors to determine if they should be allowed to burn or not. I'm just throwing out there that maybe part of the ordinance would be that they'd have to check with the fire department, and they know all about wind speeds and, and all of that, much more than the officers on the street trying to make a decision if they're violating this ordinance or not. And if they just say no, it's no, and they don't have a permit, and we would shut them down. If we got the call, we wouldn't even have to call the fire department.
Yeah. Did you have another comment?
Yeah,
Beck?
if I may add one more thing, it is just, the fact is that it seems to me, and I didn't see the full list, that most of the communities do have pretty strict, they have restrictions about burning, except Riverwoods. And given that we are in the community with all the woods and in a beautiful forest, and all of us, I would imagine, value being in nature and being outdoors, I think it'd be aligning with our values to make sure that we also change the ordinances in order to reflect our values as well as a community.
I think we might need some clarity in the ordinance. Does that make sense to the board? If we take a look at
Well, we have some.
A little clarity
some areas-
and-
We have
and
some areas
perhaps-
we weren't reading the same way, so that's an indication we need some work done.
would the trustees like to see some revisions or some changes here, maybe to include limits such as days, limits perhaps checking in with the fire department, getting some kind of approval or permit from the fire department? Trustee Hollander?
No, I would object to having the fire department called each time. People aren't going to call. They don't want to be burdened with this. People want to be able to burn for an hour or two when they have a chance. Restricting it certain days is a problem that we always have because some people may be home on a Thursday and they want to take care of their yard. Other people work Monday through Friday. They only have weekends. I mean, I think this is a problem that is limited to a few people maybe per year that abuse the right to have freedom to burn their leaves, and we're trying to change something that's been working for a decade or more for 95% of the people. I just don't see that the individuals who are going to abuse it are going to abuse it one way or the other and going to rely upon someone else calling in the police to take care of it. Maybe it can be further defined, like to avoid trees or branches more than 4 inches or something. But I got news for you. If you've had a windstorm and you got a bunch of branches that have fallen and you want to burn them for an hour, it's difficult because where are you going to get rid of them? I mean,
Call a landscaper, just
yeah. So
or dump them in the forest like we do.
Pardon? Yeah.
Bring
So
them to my house. I won't even know.
We,
I'm sorry, Trustee
Yeah.
Clayton, I think you wanted to say something.
I think we've kind of beaten this to death at this point, and we're not having an orderly conversation. So I think what we should do is ask the village attorney to see if there's any clarifications to the ordinance that he thinks are appropriate, and then
And I
bring
was
it back
also,
to the board.
and I was also adding perhaps suggestion to limitation, and the
And
board
I'm-
can react to that.
I'm not
when it
asking
sees
for that, personally.
Clarification only.
Yes.
How about a little, instead of asking our officers to determine some of these factors, we have some kind of connection with the fire department? Would you agree to that?
You know, what I generally like to do is
Oh.
just provide a bunch of alternates, like, here's some different ideas.
Yes.
What does the board think? Because I know you'll have different views on this.
Trustee Dicken, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think what we're struggling with is figuring out how to enforce an ordinance where the nuisance is unquantifiable, where you can't say, well, it's not dry enough. Well, it's dry enough for me, or it's not dry enough for me, right? So is there excessive smoke or not excessive smoke? Who makes that determination? And I don't have a good suggestion on how to quantify that, but that's really the only way how I see we can enforce something which otherwise is permissible. I also agree with Trustee Hollander that I think not permitting to burn would be strongly opposed by the residents who have been burning for many years within the village.
I'll figure out something.
Okay, we'll bring something back to the board and the board can react. There will be alternatives.
I'll figure out something.
Give it a go, Bruce. Okay, thank you very much. Old business, we have the approval of the village organizational chart. On the agenda, there were some changes suggested at the last meeting, and you've been presented with the organizational chart with those changes made. Is there a motion for approval of the organizational chart?
So moved.
Second.
Pick one. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Jamerson. Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Dickin. Trustee Eastmon.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander. Motion carries.
Okay, are there any visitors wishing to address the board on subjects we have not already covered? Thank you. There's no reason for us to go into executive session, so the next date and time, please remember that our board meeting has been rescheduled to a Wednesday, November 6th at 7:30. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Good night. Thank you and good night.
Did a great job today.
Looking at the leaves, not turning, but just looking. We don't know much about it. There's a lot of information. Ready? You have any